Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Greenland and the Hudson River. And going to Greenland on a day like today when it's so hot out sounds really good. Why do they call it Greenland? Looks like it should have been called Whiteland. It was false advertising a little bit here, but it's the largest island in the world, mostly covered by ice. But what's the connection between Greenland and the Hudson? Well, we're going to find that out. I got a phone call from a guy, and he said, hey, I have these kids who live in Greenland. They happen to be in New York State right now. They want to go sailing on the Hudson River. Can you help? And I said, yeah, I can totally help. We're going to go sailing with these kids. Can I bring some kids from Poughkeepsie on board too? And he said, sure, bring them. So we went sailing on the Hudson River with these kids from Greenland. They actually dressed up for us in some of their more native clothing. And it was a great time. They got to learn a little bit about what it's like to sail on a traditional Hudson River boat, learned a little bit about the ecology of the river. I got a chance to inspire them with singing some sea shanties so they could raise the sail. They had such a great time that they actually came back the following year. This time they're not wearing their traditional clothes. They're wearing like, hey, we're normal teenagers. We're going to wear our normal clothes. And I was like, all right, that's cool. So here they are, sailing again on the Hudson River. And here they are, they're steering on the Clearwater. We steer with a big tiller. It looks like a long pole. That's how they steer. It was a little warmer this day, too, so it was kind of nice. And we introduced them to some of the life that's living in the Hudson River, including my favorite fish of all time, which is this little guy called the hog-choker. It's like, why did he get a weird name like hog-choker? Well, it's a long story, and we don't have enough time to go into it, but the reason one of my favorite fish is because it happens to be a very touchable fish. This fish can stay out of water for quite some time. It's very slimy. And the kids from Greenland were really into it. They thought, wow, this is cool. This little flatfish that hardly anybody knows about. So I had a friend of mine on board the boat too, and he took a piece of chalk and he drew right on the deck of the Clearwater the biggest fish that lives in the Hudson River. It's called the Atlantic sturgeon. And so he was showing that to the kids from Greenland. He says, yeah, this is the coolest fish that we have in the Hudson. It can get to be 12 feet long. Then he gave the chalk to the kids from Greenland, and he says, I want you guys to draw something on the deck of the boat that swims in your waters. And this is what they drew. So, so it's like, all right, we have sturgeon in the Hudson, and that's pretty cool, but they have narwhals that are swimming in their water. So that was pretty cool. So we had a great time with them, and then at the end of the sail, I went up to their leader, and I said, hey, I always wanted to go to Greenland. Do you think we could figure that out? And he says, well, I bet we could figure something like that out. And before I knew it, I was on a flight to Greenland and these are friends of mine from Holland who were doing a project in Greenland to talk about climate change, because climate change is a really big deal up in Greenland. There's a lot of ice in Greenland. There's also a lot of ice that's melting. So I got a chance to go along with them. They were going to build this climate change sculpture that I was just kind of tagging along with it. But it got me a flight to Greenland, which was great. The last step of the flight required a helicopter ride, which was my first experience in a helicopter, but that was a lot of fun. We were not living in igloos, all right? We were living in nice little comfortable cottages, but we were 350 miles north of the Arctic Circle, so we were way up there. And on this little island called Umanak, which is the name of that mountain, which means heart-shaped in the Inuit language. So here's Umanak, and there I am, and it was pretty amazing, I have to say. It was cold in Greenland, but not as cold really as quite as I thought it was going to be. And our goal was to figure out where we're going to put this sculpture. So we were looking around, and as I'm walking around town, I'm looking, wow, how come there's all these dogs hanging around in Greenland? And these are sled dogs. And outside almost everybody's cottage, there were sled dogs. And these were really not pets, they were working dogs. So I took a bunch of pictures of the sled dogs. They were very cute, but these are big working dogs. There's one of the pups, and I said, hey, could I take that pup back home with me? And they said, no, you can't. Because they wouldn't be happy here in the United States. It's too warm for them here, really. Sled dogs is a big deal in Greenland, and it's part of the tradition of the culture up there to use sled dogs. And there are people have lawn ornaments outside. Well, a lot of people in Greenland, their lawn ornaments are dried fish. They're not really ornaments, but they use the fish as food for the dogs, really. A lot of it is for the dogs. So you walk around town and you see a lot of drying fish hanging around out there, which is kind of interesting. So here we are, we're looking for the perfect iceberg to put this sculpture on. So we shouldn't have been able to do this because the ice was actually very, very thin. at this time of year. It shouldn't have been that thin, but it was. So we actually could go pretty far up the fjord. And I got a chance to take some pictures of icebergs that I just like, what is going on here? I don't know what those two blue lines are, but it was just pretty spectacular. And then all of a sudden, we're behind a cloud bank. The sun is shining on another glacier. It was pretty spectacular. And finally, we found the perfect iceberg. And this is what the artists decided they were going to put their sculpture on. So while they were putting together the sculpture, I got a chance to walk around town a little bit and visit with the people, and that was great. And yeah, you know, people in Greenland, they have cell phones. And teenagers, when it's cold, still don't wear hats. So it's, no matter where you're from, that's a traditional thing, I guess. And here's some kids, instead of skateboarding, you know, here's what they're doing in Greenland. They're running their dogs. So here's one of the local teens here, and he wanted to show some of the girls his sled dog whip technique. Now, they don't whip the dogs, so they just make a sound with the whip to make a snap, so they're not hitting the dogs. But there's a technique to it. So he's trying to show off his technique to the local girls here, and they're all like checking it out. And then as he whips the whip, it kind of hits him back in the face. So I kind of felt sorry for him a little bit, you know, but I also laughed as well. So anyway, here they all are, and there's the sculpture. And they made some panels with some local wildlife in there. Here I am standing in front of the sculpture, and they needed actually the helicopter to get it out onto the iceberg to pose it, and there it is. It was an amazing experience, but part of what I learned from this experience was that there are very dramatic connections to places like Greenland, even here in the Hudson Valley and far away. You all probably have heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, that plastic pile that's way out in the Pacific Ocean. There's a bunch of those. That plastic has been able to travel far away to collect in far off places like the Pacific Ocean. It's a mess. Well, pollution, air pollution, mercury, even pesticides and PCBs has also been able to migrate up into the Arctic and settle into the ice there. So as the ice has melted, it's made the fish in the area of Greenland contaminated. So a lot of the kids in Greenland, if they're eating the fish up there, they're eating fish that's contaminated. And that's not pollution that they made. That's pollution that came from places like the United States and Europe and Asia. So that's one connection right there. Another connection is that as Greenland melts, that's a lot of water. And that water is going into the ocean, and as the ocean rises up, it's going to affect places like the Hudson River. Right here in the Hudson River, we're very close to sea level. You may remember Superstorm Sandy, right? There was a big storm surge, and it flooded a lot of the area here. So Greenland would be contributing to that, flooding, sea level rise. So that's a bit of a problem. So what can we do, really, to help make Greenland at least a more sustainable place? Well, we could stop polluting. That would be great. Clean energy, that's great. Use less plastics, that's also a great thing. And really just try as hard as we can to live good lives here in the United States to make sure that the people far away aren't suffering from the effects of our pollution. So I had an amazing time. The Greenland Connection also is a personal connection for me because I made a lot of great friends, met a lot of nice folks, and I hope to go back there again someday soon. But thanks again for listening, and appreciate it.